We're going to continue our discussion about the new State Board of Education with two of its newest members. We have joining us James E. Ford of Charlotte, former North Carolina Teacher of the Year, now running his own consulting business focused on equity issues. So welcome back to the show, James.
Good to be here again.
And a friend of the show, J.B. Buxton. J.B. is here from Raleigh. He's a member at large of the State Board of Education. Recently appointed, I should mention, James is of the Southwest Education region of the State Board of Education. Again, so thank you and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you.
What I wanted to ask you about first, and I'm going to start with you, James. How do you see your role going into this? You had your very first meeting, and anyone who knows you, you weren't quiet, which is good. So tell me, how do you see your role? What does James Ford want to be on the State Board of Education?
I think, well, in addition to working in unison with my fellow board members, I'm beating the same drum, right, and have for a long time, which is just trying to find ways to equalize opportunity for all kids. And when I talk about equity, obviously I talk about race, but I'm talking about socioeconomic, I'm talking about linguistic diversity, I'm talking about the differences in educational opportunity for kids in rural North Carolina versus urban, just working with the populations that we know are often underserved and overlooked, and that's kind of my heart.
Right. Now, JB, I mentioned James was former Teacher of the Year. I didn't give you a little bit of a plug. You've been working in education policy for decades.
You call me old?
I'm calling you old, a little bit old. Well, I guess we'll say 20 plus years. How about that?
That's good.
But including you were Deputy State Superintendent of Public Instruction. So a role which you had significant interaction with the State Board of Education. So, the conversation I just had with Chairman Davis, you've kind of been on both sides of that now. You're now sitting on the State Board. Sort of how do you see, look, there's undeniable tension. I mean, there's been tension between the State Board. I mean, Bill Kobe resigned. I mean, I think it was pretty clear that, it was time for him. He's like, I've had what I want to do. How do you hope to bridge these divides? You think your experience being on the other side can help?
Well, first, I just want to say how great it is to have James Ford on this board. I mean, to have his perspective from the classroom and what he's done with schools across the state and nationally is outstanding. So I'm appreciative of the governor's confidence in him and his accepting that appointment, and it's great to have him next to me here. I will tell you that as I sit at that state board table, I do think about the time when I sat on the other side of the table. We're a strategic body. I mean, our role is to be strategic about the direction and focus of the system and the public school system, and to manage the efforts of the department against that strategy to support the improvement of education in the state and to support the educational performance of kids. We don't operate the State Department. We don't run schools. We don't run districts. We support their capacity to do the right thing for their educators and the right thing for kids. So I see myself and my colleagues as sitting in a strategic role where we can move the system to best support the capacity of our districts and schools to do the jobs we need them to do in their communities for kids.
Right. I want to go back to your James, your comments about equity. I know that the State Board just had a planning, I guess, a retreat, or at least a meeting before the public meeting, and part of that was a pretty intensive focus on race and equity. Sort of tell me more about the board's goals that you see related to those issues.
Well, I think under the leadership of Chairman Davis, we've been pretty forthright in acknowledging that there are all sorts of different breaking points, and that for us to ignore issues of race, for us not to really be firmly grounded and build up the knowledge base around these issues, and not just how they impact our sector, but how they impact all of the sectors, so that it's, we can't just talk about achievement without talking about the gaps and opportunities. So for us, it's about, one, us getting to know each other a little bit better, but also exploring as a group, and as JB mentioned, being strategic about how we diagnose problems and how we administer interventions in ways that acknowledge all of the underlying factors that really just culminate inside the classroom. So I think race is a very firm foundation to start on. We see it in just about every other aspect of society, but we're going to continue to talk about these things because, education is not divorced from the other societal and political reality.
Right. JB, do you think, does the board and really the education, leadership, governance structure, are there blind spots that I think that our state needs to work on in terms of maybe things they're not seeing or don't understand yet? In the equity context.
Sure. I think an understanding of the department's role in building capacity in districts and schools is a blind spot right now. What I see coming back into the state government is a serious atrophy of the ability of the department and the state to support low-performing districts
Right.
and schools. And when we think about all the issues that play out that James just talked about, the ability of the state to provide strategic support, I think we got a lot of rebuilding to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just talked to a superintendent just yesterday, and they made a similar comment. They said, we feel like at this point, we're going on our own. That they don't see, I mean, it's about some of the supports. I mean, they're in a transition. I mean, to be fair,
Sure.
yeah, to Superintendent Johnson and his team. I mean, I just met with Deputy State Superintendent, said the same thing. They're in a transition. But that's a good point. All right, let me ask you about ISD. I believe both of you voted to sort of delay the decision to vote. What are your concerns? And I guess, one of my questions, I didn't ask Chairman Davis, but there's a good chance you're going to get to this vote in December, and the superintendent, the school system, the county commission, the teachers are all going to say, we don't want this, and you're going to be, I mean, do you still vote to movement of the ISD?
Well, my concerns to your original question is about process. As I mentioned, I'm coming into this. I know what the law is, and I think that, frankly, Dr. Hale and Ms. Smith are kind of hamstrung a little bit with the process and some of the confines and the timelines. But what I know about any sort of intervention that's supposed to be community supported is that you have to take time to really build responsiveness with that community and be able to hear and adhere to the concerns and not be put upon, and particularly the populations we're talking about. And that's something I lifted. Low-income populations, communities of color. This is not their first time at the rodeo. And so I just had concerns about the way that it's being deployed, and then also the information that's informing that. I mean, we're strategic, and so that takes a lot of information, and I don't feel like I got enough of that in that initial meeting to make a decision.
Yeah, I mean, we're running short time, but what do you think, JB? I mean, you think you guys getting some more info?
I think we have two issues. One is I just don't think we had the data we needed at that meeting to make that decision. We had a lot of data about Carver. We had 5 other schools on the board, so to speak, that we need to know more about. Are Carver's children the one most in need if we've got to have one by law that's going to be in the ISD? But I think it actually points to a much bigger issue. We had 5 other schools that clearly need some level of support and coaching and assistance. We had 8 other schools that were taken off that list for various reasons that had nothing to do with their not needing support. We've got almost 400. What are we doing beyond the one that goes in the ISD?
Right.
That's a much bigger conversation that we've got to face head on, I think.
And it's a much bigger conversation, unfortunately, than we have time for today. We need to have you both back because there's a lot to talk about. But JB, James, good to see you both, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. After the break, this week's Leadership Spotlight.